Oh, thank you. I'm glad to know that. Okay, thanks to Paula. Sometime back, she sent me a note asking if we couldn't do something with songwriting teams. That was among a couple of other good suggestions that Paula had. And I thought, well, that sounds like that'll be great. And little did I know what a pain in the ass it would be to put this presentation together. And I'm still not finished working with it, but I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I welcome your comments because I've put a lot of work into this, but I'm not sure I've got the thing right anyway. So let me know what you think, if there's too much text, if there's not enough, whatever. But we're going to go ahead and start now since it's 12:03. Songwriting teams is the subject. We won't look at people like Neil Diamond, for instance, because he didn't write with a lot of other people. Early on, he was in the Brill Building and he wrote songs for folks, but he never was identified solely with another songwriter. So this will be teams, Bacharach and David. The Beach Boys had several teams internal to them. Elton John and Taupin were a team. So that's what we're going to look at, and we're going to start with probably the greatest rock and roll, rockabilly, whatever you want to call it, songwriting team of all, which would be Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller. These two kids were incredible in what they put together over the years. Thousands of songs were written. Hundreds and maybe into the thousands were recorded. Jerry Lieber was the kind of a wise guy. He was the lyric writer. He was the one that would bounce around and do all kind of crazy things. Mike Stoller was the fellow who sat there pushing the little keys on the piano. He was laid back, very quiet, but they had a lot of things in common. And I should stop and say, just like all the other meetings we've had in the past, if you have something to say, just interrupt. Don't wait till the end of it or anything, just interrupt, push down your space key, hold it, and you can talk. And we'll address that, or we'll say we're not going to address that. But Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller, both born to Jewish families, one in Baltimore and one in Long Island, not very far apart in age, just a few months as I remember. As it says, I'm not going to read these exactly, but Lieber born in the black ghetto area of Baltimore. And from that, he would go to black clubs as a young man, and he'd sit outside and listen to the music because he was too young to get in. And he got a great love for that kind of music. And Stoller's parents were politically, as it said, politically and morally very liberal, so they exposed him to all manner of people, black, white, Hispanic, whoever they would come across. There was a great cross-section of America that came through Stoller's home. And he was lucky enough to be able to take piano lessons from a man who had taught the great Fats Waller a lot of his piano technique, and this was James Johnson, as it says there. And Stoller didn't know who the heck James Johnson was. He wasn't real sure who Fats Waller was, but he figured it out, and eventually he came to owe James Johnson so much because he taught him and tutored him and told him he was a pretty good piano player when he really wasn't at the time. But eventually both of the families moved out to the West Coast, and the two boys got together. Always interested me that he had one blue eye and one brown eye, and reminded me of the fellow that told me he had a girlfriend with a blue eye and a green eye, and he didn't know whether to stop or go. But that's beside the point. These guys dressed black, they thought black, they dated black women, black girls, if you will, because they were boys at the time. everything they did involved the black community. And that certainly showed up in their music. As I mentioned, they did so many things, and these are just a few of the awards that they were given. Take a look at that. I'll be right back. I had to get my gin. And you think, well, that's pretty nice. As you remember, Big Mama Thornton did the original version of Hound Dog, which in 1988 was placed in the Grammy Hall of Fame. So all of these awards came to these two guys. And they go on and on and on. The song we know as Kansas City by Wilbert Harrison was first done by someone else and just called Kansas City Woman. Sometimes in their music. Kansas City Love. Okay, somebody's not on. As you remember, these awards, all of them on. Okay, thank you. So, very well renowned for the music that they did, the words coming out of Lieber, the music coming out of Stoller. Well, we'll talk about their music, and what we're going to look at here is, of course, I sent you some lists, very extensive lists of songs that Lieber and Stoller did. I'm going to do this for every team that we looked at. So you can look down there and say, gosh, I didn't know they wrote that. And I think on Lieber and Stoller's out to the right, it also indicates, other than the original artist, like in Kansas City Lovin', it was Little Willie Littlefield. It would also show you the number of people, or the different people that covered that music, like Wilbert Harrison, that, he just changed it to Kansas City. So we'll look and see how these guys progressed as they got more and more into their craft. And this was a craft for them. They, much like Motown later on, they tried not to write songs. They wanted to write hits. I guess that's what every songwriter wants to write. Well, we'll listen, I hope, to Kansas City Lovin' on the original release in 1952. Let's see if this works. Thank you.
Kansas City, here I come. I'm going to Kansas City. Kansas City, here I come. They got a crazy way of loving there, and I'm gonna get me some. I'm gonna be standing on the corner, 12th Street and Vine. I'm gonna be standing on the corner, 12th Street and Vine. With my Kansas City baby and a bottle of Kansas City wine. Well, I might take a train, I might take a plane, but if I have to walk, I'm going just the same. I'm going to Kansas City, Kansas City, here I come. They got a crazy way of loving there, and I'm gonna get me some.
Now the song, of course, reflects the tempo of the times and what the type of music that was going on in the early days of rock and roll. Get out of here. Okay. If you listen to the Wilbert Harrison version, which you can do by going to Zoom, you'll see it's jazzed up a little bit more. It's got a little heavier drum beat, which is a sign of what was going on in the music world at that time. So the songs evolve, as do the songwriters. Now I mentioned Big Mama Thornton, 1953. She first did the original version of Hound Dog by Lieber and Stoller. Now I know on a later version that we've actually seen before in some of the other classes. Damn, come on, Tom.
Yeah. Tom, got a question.
Yeah, fire away.
That last picture you had, it was these guys living in L.A. Kansas City Bill was the orchestra, but then Texas was the publishing company. How did that all get about? I mean, it seems everybody's all over the place.
Well, yeah, because this was the beginning of, and that's a good question. Thank you, Dave. This was the beginning of these independent labels and these young people coming into the business. Prior to this time, prior to the 40s and into the 50s, Tin Pan Alley had been where everything happened. There in New York, Tin Pan Alley was where the songwriters were in little cubicles right next to each other, and if you couldn't think of a song, if you just listened to what your neighbor was playing, maybe you'd get a good idea for another song. So, and there was like RCA and just a few, Columbia, just a few companies that were releasing records, 78s, of course, at the time. So as rockabilly came about, we started having these small studios, think Sam Phillips and others as it went along, who would make these recordings, and they didn't have an affiliation with anybody in New York. So they would look around and find somebody to press the record for them, and they might try, to release it on their own. Well, this was fine and dandy and they had complete control, but if they had a record that was really good, and we've mentioned this before, if they had a hit record, it could put them out of business because they couldn't get enough distribution to get the record out to the people that wanted to buy it. So they began to make deals with established companies, not the big ones, but there was people like Atlantic Records, for instance, and so many others in the that up to that time had been releasing just records by African Americans. So the studios would work with a middleman, if you will, middlewoman, take your pick, and then they'd get the thing pressed, and then somebody else would do the distribution on it. So that's where you got these different companies, where you see Joe Blow's company did the recording, Sam Jones sang it, and Bill's record company was the label, and a fourth company might have distributed it. Does that make sense? Am I making myself clear? Okay. I'm going to assume that's a yes. All right.
That's a yes. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. Thanks. I think on the one of the times Big Mama Thornton appeared on someone's TV program, and I can't recall who it was, but Buddy Guy was playing guitar behind her. And as we talked about Buddy Guy in some of our previous courses, who's just an absolutely beautiful, wonderful guitar player. He's gotten the Kennedy Center Award, just an incredible musician, a blues player. So anyway, of course, in 1956, Elvis Presley released Hound Dog because he was in Las Vegas performing on a very small scale in the, not the big room, but the room off to the side. And he heard a group, Freddie Bell and the Bellboys, doing their version of Hound Dog, which was completely, the words were very different than those that were written by Lieber and Stoller. But Elvis heard that second version, liked it because it was really about a hound dog, whereas the original Lieber and Stoller song had been about a gigolo. And the woman said, you a hound dog, you go out all night long and then you come back to me, get out of here. So Elvis released the cover of it, which had different wording. A side note here, Mike Stoller had been on his honeymoon and was coming back from Europe on a little ship called the Andrea Doria, which the travel agent had recommended he get on. And of course, the Andrea Doria, not too far out of New York, was hit by the Stockholm, a Swedish cruise ship, I think. I think they were both cruise ships. I used to think it was a freighter, but just the other day I read something that said the Stockholm was a cruise ship. Anyway, it damn near cut the Andrea Doria in two. And there was loss of life, but it wasn't as dramatic and traumatic as, say, the Titanic had been, but there were people that were killed in this accident. But when Stoller and his wife finally get to the shore, and Jerry Lieber's there with a big smile on his face, says, "We got a #1 record, Hound Dog #1." And he said, that's several years old. Who did it? And he said, Elvis Presley. And Stoller said, who's he? Because he had no idea Elvis Presley wasn't a big name. So anyway, a little side note. In 1954, and I tried to pick not the most popular songs they wrote, but just interesting songs. 54, they wrote a song that was recorded, as you see, by Willie and Ruth, and later by Elvis, called Love Me, which is something I say often.
Treat me like a fool, treat me mean and cruel, God love me, break my faithful heart, tear it all apart, God love me. If you ever go,
Now, of course, as we know, Elvis would go on to record this. But back to what Dave had mentioned a little bit earlier, over on the left-hand side of the record label, you see BMI and Quintet Music Company and a number, and it tells you on the right-hand side that it's a vocal, big surprise. And also, you look at the little bitty hole in the center, you know this was a 78 RPM, or revolutions per minute, record. So BMI was the new group that had formed when all these little independent studios and managers and all of this, when they came about, Broadcast Music Incorporated was getting to be a huge competitor for the old moldy ASCAP, the American Society of Composers, Authors, and Publishers, as I remember. The ASCAP folks were the old Tin Pan Alley group. They'd been collecting money from, whenever we first had recorded music, it'd get played, ASCAP would make a note of it, and that way the composer or everybody that should get a royalty would get paid. Well, they weren't about to let these rockers, these rockabilliers, these African American folks in, and so Broadcast Music Incorporated was formed, and they started taking all of these little groups in, and they would keep track of their music and see that somebody got paid, usually not the artist, but at least the people that recorded it, and maybe the folks that wrote it. So that's a little more on top of what we were talking about before. Okay, let me see if I can figure out what I'm doing. And we'll listen to a little bit of Elvis's version. Now you'll notice everything, the Lieber and Stoller version is very bluesy, very much what you would hear if you went into some of the African American clubs, the Cotton Club in New York. You'd hear that music because, again, they were so oriented towards black society, African American society, that Lieber and Stoller reflected that in many, many of their records. Elvis was the rockabilly cat, so he changed their music a little bit, and that's fine.
Elvis Presley. Thank you very much, Mr. Sullivan. Friends, we'd like to do a number for you from our new album. It was just released by RCA Victor this week. With the help of the Jordanaires, friends, we'd like to do one called Love Me.
Scotty Moore on guitar.
There's a new one on there, isn't it? Treat me like a fool, treat me mean, but love me. Yeah. Break my faithful heart, tear it all apart, but love me. Won't you love me? Wherever go, darling, I'll be oh so lonely. I'll be sad and blue, crying over you, dear only. He's somebody I would beg and steal, beg and steal, just to feel your heart. I want your heart being close to mine. So wherever go, darling, I'll be oh so lonely. I'll be sad and blue, crying over you, dear only. I would beg and steal, we would beg and steal, just to feel, yes, just to feel your heart. I want your heart being close to mine. So close to mine. Wherever go, darling, I'll be oh so lonely. love me. Oh,
Three lip curls and an oil check at the end when he grabbed his hair. Probably enough oil in there to run the country for a year. But his own way of presenting music, what a phenomenon, just absolute phenomenon. When he came to Sam Phillips' attention, Sam Phillips at Sun Records and Phillips Recording Service had been looking for a white man who sounded black, quote unquote, because he knew he could just make $1 zillion off of it. And, excuse me. And of course, what happened was what I mentioned earlier. Elvis became so popular that Sam couldn't keep up with the distribution. So in comes Colonel Parker, the Satan of the recording world, and he makes a deal with RCA Victor. And Elvis goes over there for, Sam got $35,000 and Elvis got 10 grand or something like that. But other interesting songs that came about and other interesting singers. Also in 1955, Vaughn Monroe, remember him? Song written by Lieber and Stoller.
He wore black denim trousers and motorcycle boots and a black leather jacket with an eagle on the back. He had a hopped up sickle that took off like a gun. That fool was the terror of Highway 101. Well, he never washed his face and he never combed his hair. He had axle grease embedded underneath his fingernails. On the muscle of his arm was a red tattoo, a picture of a heart saying, "Mother, I love you." He had a pretty girlfriend by the name of Mary Lou, but he treated her just like he treated all the rest. And everybody pitied her and everybody knew he loved that doggone motorcycle best. He wore black denim trousers and motorcycle boots and a black leather jacket with an eagle on the back. He had a hopped up sickle that took off like a gun. That fool was the terror of Highway 101.
Interesting choice of performers. Vaughn Monroe, who was well known for doing a lot of popular music at the time. Another 1955 hit, and this is the beginning of a sub-career for Lieber and Stoller, with a group called the Robins. Those of you that have hung around with me for a while remember when we did doo-wop and we had the bird groups. Well, the Robins were one of those bird groups. And they did a little thing called Smokey Joe's Cafe. And it's kind of an introduction for Lieber and Stoller into songs that are mini operettas almost, if you want. They're playlets where you can have a situation and you watch that situation develop, other than just saying, "Oh, darling, I love you. Yes, I do. The moon is blue, blah, blah, blah." So the Robins, and we'll talk more about the Robins as we go on, but here's the Robins. Smokey Joe's Cafe, 19...
Oh, I, Smokey Joe's Cafe. Oh, I, Smokey Joe's Cafe.
One day while I was eating beans
at Smokey Joe's Cafe,
just sitting digging all the scenes
at Smokey Joe's Cafe,
a chick came walking through the door that I had never seen before. At least I never saw her down
at Smokey Joe's Cafe.
Ooh, and I started shaking when she sat right down next to me. Ooh, her knees were almost touching mine
at Smokey Joe's Cafe.
Her chill was running down my spine
at Smokey Joe's Cafe.
Oh, I could smell a sweet perfume. She smiled at me, my heart went boom. Then everybody in the room
at Smokey Joe's Cafe,
they said, "Man, be careful, that chick belongs to Smokey Joe." saw a man, a chef hat on his head and a knife in his hand. He grabbed me by my collar and began to shout.
You better eat up all your beans and bar and clear right on out.
Yes, I know I'll never eat again
At Smokey Joe's Cafe.
and so we'll never meet again.
At Smokey Joe's Cafe.
I don't want to tell the whole story, so we'll cut it off there. But, of course, this group, and you can see in the background, by the way, Atco. Atco is a sub-company, if you will, of Atlantic Records. Atlantic Records was doing Ruth Brown and a lot of African-American acts, as well as others. But they were two brothers from Turkey, and they put together this label, Atlantic Records, and it became almost dominant over the next 10, 15 years. Okay, now we'll hear more about Smokey Joe's Cafe and the Robins a little later on. Of course, Smokey Joe's Cafe, I believe, was the name of the musical, the Broadway musical that was done about Lieber and Stoller and the songs they wrote and their history, and it was as accurate as most Broadway plays or movies are. But anyway, another group that Lieber and Stoller became associated with, and this too made some changes in how they were writing songs and the things that would make up that song. The Drifters. And somewhere I have a list of the Drifters personnel, and it's about 75 different people over the years. But if I find that, I might send it out to you. A song in 1956 by the Drifters, Ruby Baby. Early Drifters group, but different sound than what we would have a little later on. But of course, there's different personnel. They would come in and leave and go away and come back. The Drifters' name was owned by the manager of the group, whose name escapes me, George Goldman. I can't remember George's name. Anyway, and he would just change personnel. Sometimes he'd get rid of all of them and get another group and change their name to the Drifters. But the songwriting team of Lieber and Stoller continued to write excellent songs for the Drifters through the years. 1956, we've talked in the past, for those of you that were so bored you attended my other classes, we talked about Big Joe Turner. Used to be a singing bartender in Kansas City, which was almost, if you think of Dodge City of the Old West, it was a wide open town, gambling, prostitution. I wish I'd lived there, but Big Joe Turner had this huge voice because he'd be behind the bar serving drinks, and at the same time he'd be singing with the band that was on the bandstand. So he had a big, big voice, and he was a big man. But Lieber and Stoller wrote some interesting songs for him.
Well, a girl had chicken fell in love with a chicken hawk. Well, a girl had chicken fell in love with a chicken hawk. You fell head over heels for that hawk's sweet talk. Take me up, Honky, take me up in the sky. I'm just a little bitty chicken and I don't know how to fly. He said up, up and away. We gonna fly all day. Up, up and away. We gonna fly all day. Up, 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 up and away. He made a bald-headed eagle flying up there in the blue. He made a bald-headed eagle flying up there in the blue. Well, the eagle told the hawk, I'm gonna steal that chicken from you. Well, the hawk started flying like a P-8 single jet. Well, the hawk started flying like a P-8 single jet. He said, cool down, chicken, the eagle ain't got it yet.
Of course, like many of the songs of the era, it was working off of another song. Basically, Lieber and Stoller took Big Maybell's Shake, Rattle, and Roll melody and just put some new words to it. Hey, it's a quick way to write a song. And if you listen to this and just think of the words to Shake, Rattle, and Roll.
Up and away, we gonna fly all day. Up and away.
But hey, it's a Sunday afternoon, and they didn't have much to do, but they didn't feel like writing a lot. So they just, and as I mentioned many times, mediocre artists borrow, real pros steal. And that's, pretty much what they did here was just steal the feeling of another song. But it was successful. Now, we talked about the Robins a few minutes before with Smokey Joe's Cafe. Well, Lieber and Stoller liked working with them so much, they continued to work with them, and a couple of personnel changed, and they became the Coasters. So once that came on, there was a whole series of songs Lieber and Stoller did for the Coasters. This one happens to be one of the early ones. Another story song, because the Coasters would act these songs out on the stage or in the studio when they're making them. And you can see them, really making, running around if that's what the song's talking about, or hiding if that's what the song's talking about, or searching if that's what the song's talking about. So, the Coasters. That so recognizable lead singer for the Coasters, and they would have a couple of personnel changes as well, but still their songs just came across so well. And who we got? Perry Como. Hey, just to show you that Lieber and Stoller don't just write for these rockers, these rhythm and blues guys. Dancing was a song Perry Como did. They were trying to expand what they could do. I don't know if Perry Como asked him for a song or if he just happened to like this one.
Oh, the band stopped playing and the cup stopped swaying, but we kept on dancing. The lights went on and the crowd was gone, but we kept on dancing. The janitor said, please let me sweep the floor. So I hummed a tune and we danced right through the door. It started raining, but we both were insane, and we kept right on dancing. We looked aside by the traffic light, but we kept on dancing. The signal was red, so we just tapped our feet.
I guess you could imagine Little Richard doing that. Well, maybe not. But anyway, just to show you the breadth of things these guys wrote. Ruth Brown, who, as I mentioned earlier in passing, was really the rock on which Atlantic Records was built. She kept that thing going, that company going from the very beginning of it through the first very tough years. So in 1957, this was one of the first successful songs for Atlantic Records, called Lucky Lips, Don't I Wish?
When I was just a little girl with long and silky curls, my mama told me, honey, you've got more than other girls. Now you may not be good looking, but you soon wear diamond clips, and you'll never have to worry, 'cause you've got lucky lips. Lucky lips are always kissing, lucky lips are never blue. Lucky lips will always find a pair of lips that will be true. I don't need a four-leaf clover, rabbit's foot, or good luck charm. With lucky lips I'll always have a fella in my arms. With lucky lips I'll always have a fella in my arms.
Of course, Ruth Brown would go on to have a number of hits. She would appear on Broadway. I think the play was Black and Blue. And that was quite a success for her. I think Laverne Baker took her place after Ruth Brown stopped in Black and Blue. But we'll go on. You see that who else recorded that? Gail Storm. You know, My Little Margie. Cliff Richard, who was an English fella. He got it up to number 62 in the US, number 4 in the UK. Back to the Coasters, another Lieber and Stoller song. This was really the song that brought them to the attention of the public, and you can see, you know, who else has done this song, who covered it. Jim Croce, Ace Cannon, the Hollies, a whole bunch of folks. And Lieber and Stoller are just sitting back collecting money every time somebody does that.
Now, the top 10 board for this week, there are no new additions, but there's a little juggling around of the various positions
hush.
here. We'll check them up. No takes. The theme drops down, and Wild One goes to the top. There you have them, 1 through 10. You know, it's a funny thing about certain records. We've talked of them many, many times about what I call the great all-time hits, the songs that people ask for continually, again and again. This is one that's been performed before here on Saturday night, and we always get more requests for it. It's a silly, happy sort of thing, and it came out, I would guess, somewhere 2-3 years ago. It's a song called Searchin'. Again, here are the Coasters.
And there's a history of early radio. Sherlock Holmes, Boston Blackie, Bulldog Drummond. The topical references there you would think would hurt the song as time goes on, but to my knowledge, nobody's updated it with Matlock or Cannon or any of these other folks. But they're searching around trying to find that lady. And they just put on a great, great show. Another Coasters song, written by Lieber and Stoller, and we're introducing a new name, which we'll see a little later on, Doc Pomus. Jerome Felder, a nice young Jewish lad who was crippled with polio, and he was short and he was fat, but boy, could he sing the blues and could he write songs. For this particular song, the only thing Doc Pomus really did for the song was give him a title. And he was talking to Lieber and Stoller, and he said, you guys ought to do a song about young blood, young people. And so Lieber and Stoller did most of the work, but they were honest enough and kind enough to give Doc Pomus credit for giving him the idea. So again, one of the early, I believe this was the B-side to Searchin'.
I saw her standing on the corner, a yellow ribbon in her hair. I couldn't keep myself from shouting, look at there. Look at there. Look at there.
Look at that.
Young blood. Young blood. Tell me what it is. Young blood. I can't get you out of my mind. I took one look and I was fractured. I tried to walk but I was lame. I tried to talk but I just stuttered. Why, what's your name?
What's your name? What's your name?
Young blood. Young blood.
Interestingly enough, as you look at the picture here for the Coasters and the roller coaster sort of behind them, looking at the gentleman in the picture, the second guy from the left, if you look at his hand, this cover was censored. They made them change this cover because of the position of his hand might be taken for, I don't know, something else. Who am I to say? But interesting things with the censors over the years. Those of you that haven't gotten to my censored presentation, this ought to put this in there. Anyway, on we go. The songs they wrote for Elvis, having only, let's see, did they? I don't think they really formally met Elvis because Colonel Parker didn't want anybody close to Elvis. At one time, there was an associate of Elvis's who was talking to Lieber and Stoller, and they told this associate, we have this song we think Elvis might like. And so the guy took it and he said, yeah, Elvis is going to love this. Well, Colonel Parker got back in their face and said, I'm the one that decides what Elvis likes. And if you ever approach him with a song again, you won't play in this neighborhood again. He was going to put him, he was so, what a schmuck. Anyway, these are some of the songs. I think maybe most of them, there may be a couple on the next page, that Lieber and Stoller wrote for Elvis. And there's really no B-sides on there except maybe Bossa Nova Baby. The rest of them are pretty good songs. Jailhouse Rock, of course, is now looked back on as the first rock video, because of how well it was done in that movie. One of two movies that Elvis made that was actually worth paying 75 cents at the time to go in and watch. I'm not sure if it's worth paying, what is it now at the theaters, $200 a seat or something, to go in and watch a movie. But Jailhouse Rock and King Creole were two exceptional movies of his.
Ladies and gentlemen, a little while back, I had a kind of a vacation with a bunch of men in a big place away out yonder, and while I was there, these men, kind of guests, you might say, we'd get together and horse around a little bit and sing, because we were having such a good time. And we always had a lot of fun with this one, the Jailhouse Rock.
Hey, pick up my
One threw a party in the county jail. The prison band was there, they began to wail. The band was jumping and the joint began to swing. You should have heard the knocked out jailbird sing, let it rock. Everybody let it rock. Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Spider Murphy played it in a saxophone. Little Joe was blowing on the slide trombone. Drummer blow from Illinois with crash, boom, bang. The whole rhythm section was a purple gang. Let it rock. Everybody let it rock. Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock. Number 47 said to number 3, you the cutest jailbird I ever did see. I sure would be delighted with your company. Come on and do the jailhouse rock with me. Let it rock. Everybody let it rock. Lay it on me, Daddy-O. Everybody in the whole cell block was dancing to the jailhouse rock.
What a great video. Now, interestingly, a couple of things there. It mentioned Spider Murphy playing the tenor saxophone. Well, Spider Murphy was actually a session musician who played on a lot of Elvis's songs. So the Lieber and Stoller knew him from the various sessions that Spider Murphy had done. We've got another class coming up after this, so we won't have a chance to do a whole lot more, but this is going to be a long presentation, and we may take a break. We may make this part 1 and 2 because we've got an awful lot to go. Think about what you've seen so far, and you guys know how to get in touch with me. Send me an email or whatever. What you think? Gee, Tom, you did too much on this, not enough on that, more whatever. I'm always happy to listen to anything you've got to say as long as it's written on a piece of currency. $50 bills are good. So, and I was so vermished at the beginning of this thing, since I thought we were going to all be live today, so I came over here to the center when last night at 7 o'clock, Valerie sent me an email, said, we're not going to be live. But guess what? I didn't read that till 11:45 today. But I wanted to tell you how good it is to see you guys again, and how much I'm looking forward to seeing you here in this classroom. They've done a lot of changes to the classroom. The walls are now solid gold. And it's going to be great. So I want to thank you very much. I apologize for the screw up in the beginning and being a little late, but we'll take up with Elvis next time, and then we'll get into some more folks like Neil Sedaka and Howard Greenfield. We'll get into Carole King and Jerry Goffin and a whole bunch of folks that I don't even know who they are. So, or get out of the way so they can get all set up for the next class. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week. I don't know where it'll be, but I'll be somewhere.
Thank you, Tom, so much.
Glad you're back, Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to all of you. See you later.
Thanks,
Loved
Tom.
it.
Bye.
That's us. Thank you. Thank you, Tom. Good to see you.
Thank you. Bye.